Today we're doing an abstract sketch. I love abstract sketches because they're so relaxing. It doesn't matter if it goes a bit wrong because the process is about responding to what happens, simplifying and, well, abstracting the scene. Abstraction essentially means instead of focusing on a strict interpretation of the scene or creating an objective representation of the scene, we create something more subjective, more about us. That means we focus on clear shapes, on colour, on form, rather on specifics and details. And from those clear, simple shapes, the rest is up to you. And that is exactly what we're going to look at today. If you want to look at more of these kind of fluid, loose watercolour processes, check out my courses, including the free course down below on sketchloose.co.uk. But otherwise, let's get abstracting our beautiful landscape. This is a really soft and dreamy landscape. And how on earth can we get that soft and dreamy feel with ink and watercolour? Well, we'll show you in this video, and it's all about the ink. So we're going to explore first how to get this feel in ink before adding on some beautiful, soft and semi-abstract colours. The first thing we're going to do is examine how we can get that soft, mysterious feel to these shapes whilst using ink. So typically I use carbon black ink by Platinum. And if we do a tiny little thumbnail of our scene up here, this is on Cardi watercolour paper, and we kind of get in these shapes. Well, how can we make them soft and mysterious? Well, by being a little bit gentle on the page. And then as we come forward towards these other layers, we'd be a bit bolder. But really, are we being that soft? We're not really, are we? We're not really got that feeling of softness that we're after. We've just got slightly less hard. If we use water, even straight away, these shapes are really going to stay there nice and bold. Now this is great for a lot of our sketching, but it's not what we're after today. What we want today is the ability to have really soft and light and mysterious feels to those shapes. So a couple more things to try out then. So if we do another couple of thumbnails, we can try different inks. So I've given it away already, haven't I, at the beginning, but different inks is going to be our answer to this conundrum. So if we now use a different ink which is less waterproof, so this is Absolute Black by Noodler, and we do these same ideas, these same shapes, and then the same sort of concept of coming forward in different layers. And now if we try and apply a little wash to that, well look, suddenly we can soften these shapes a bit. But actually what Noodlers is it's a permanent ink which washes a lot, so it's still got this dark permanent black line. So although we've got a lot more movement, we've still not got a sort of really soft and gentle feel. Now the next thing we could try is actually something totally different. So now I'm going to move on to a diamine ink. Now this is a totally water soluble ink made in the UK, and this ink is actually blue. It's called Little Chris or Christine, and it is a soluble ink. So what happens now if we just do these same simple shapes using our soluble ink and then the same brush, we come back in, well now we can really get that feeling of softness. And this is also actually giving us a bit of a feeling of that blueness. You might notice how as you go further back into the depth of the scene, things appear very blue. That is a normal part of depth in our sort of perception of colour. The further back we go, the more blue it feels. So let's try using this bold blue soluble ink as the key part of our sketch, which is going to create that soft and gentle feel. And with that, we are on to our scene. So let's just remember our thumbnails. We've done them nice and quickly. We've got these ideas in our head of the shapes, and we're just going to go for it. So with something like this, abstraction is not about getting the details in. Abstraction is about form, shape. It's about the idea, about creating your version of the scene. So for me, I'm focusing on the feel of this scene, these kind of dramatic shapes which fall off and are soft and lovely in the background, combined with the colours, the simple colours, as we sort of go from cool, very warm in the background to more sort of substantial in the foreground. That is what this scene is about. So don't worry too much about accuracy, but think about how do you get the feel. For me, the feel is these sharply angling cliffs. Now, because we want this to be really soft and lovely, I'm going to straight away add water. So at each stage of this, we're going to come in and immediately add water to prevent that ink drying at all, really, to make sure that we can really move all of this ink if we want. Don't need to wash all of it. We could leave some hard lines. We can also wash most of it and really soften a huge amount of it. And if we just bring that all down, get lots of lovely water on the page, already we've got that blue feeling going into the background. What we can do, keep moving that, keep softening it if you want it to be even more and more gentle. And then we can move forward up a layer. Now what's going to happen as I go in here is that our ink is going to run into the water. Now that, for me, that's fine. Look at that effect it's giving us. It's giving us this bold layering effect coming forward. What might happen is that my pen might need a little break sometimes for a little shake to get the water really flowing again. Because getting the ink flowing again, sorry, because having this water sap the ink out of it, well, that's going to just dry it out a little bit. Or, well, the opposite of dry it out, but it's going to remove all the ink. It's going to suck all the ink out at least. What I'm doing again, super just abstract shapes. You can see really clearly here the level of which I'm just abstracting out all these shapes, but trying to keep this flow, this feel through the image of how these trees climb and fall and climb and fall. And as you can see, because we're going sort of wet on wet, even wet on wet with our ink, it's giving that soft feel as we come forward. And straight away we can come in and we can just use even more water to soften out these shapes again. So hopefully you can get the idea now of what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to basically layer with our ink, come forward and forward, and become more and more certain, more and more ink, but always keeping an abstract feel to these shapes. And with that, we've got our last layer, our closest layer. And this one, we're just going to be very simple with. We've got this kind of feel of it, a river coming across here, and that we can just get with a nice straight, boldish line. Then we've got these other shapes, these kind of bushes and trees coming around like so, around like so. And again, remember, abstract landscapes, abstraction is about shape, colour, feel. It's not about being strictly representative. It's about just getting the idea, even if it's not an objective idea, it's your subjective version of the scene down. That's what I'm doing with these very, very simple shapes. And because it's my foreground layer, I want it to be a bit bolder when I apply this first wash. So I'm going to really load up the page with ink, just with some very simple hatching, very sort of quick, hard strokes on the page. What we can do, again, you guessed it, more water, and just wash that down and start to get that feel again of these layers coming forward. And there we go. So we've kind of done step one, and step two is just to layer up again with a little bit more ink. So all I'm going to do is come around my shapes, and where I want them to be more certain, have a better outline, a clearer outline, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to respond just like we normally respond to our watercolours. I'm responding here to my inks. I'm responding to where the ink has flowed up. Do you see these lovely sort of tree shapes we've got? And we can come around them and solidify them a little bit. Still very loose with all this water, but it's a little bit of solidification. Again, your pen will probably have a little bit of a time sometimes where it just stops working and it needs a little break, a little shake. Even sometimes you might want to just come inside, and if you've got a ink converter, you can just squeeze out a little bit more ink. You can just spin it around, squeeze out a little bit more ink, and that should get things running a little bit clearer again, or a little bit more bold again. So we can come back with that more well-loaded pen, and look at that, look at how bold and lovely that is now. And really just creating again this sense of drama coming forward in this abstract landscape. A few little touches here and there, and we're done with this layer. We can now move into the foreground, really bold pen this time, pressing a little harder on a drier page to really load our ink onto the page here. And again, it's just stopped working a little bit for me, and it's back with a small shake, and it'll break a little sort of bit of time off for the pen. And here we go. So now that's the sort of ink stage gradually built up, built forward. It's not to say we totally finished the ink, we might come back with it, but it's time to move on to our watercolours, to start having that contrasting side to our sketch. So what are we going to do? Well, focus on this lovely element of warmth coming forward. I've left everything wet, so things are going to run and move and splurge, and that is how I love painting. And I'm going to focus, like I said, on these lovely warm tones. So I've got a Mayan orange here. I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to just mix it with a little bit of Hansa yellow, just to mellow it out a little bit. And then we're going to just come in and add that in above these trees. What's going to happen is the trees are going to blend with these yellowy oranges. The orange is going to blend down, and everything's going to just move and sort of hopefully become nice and harmonious together. Later on we'll come back with our ink if we need to, and we can just refine a little bit of our sort of original structure if we need to. We don't necessarily need to do that. I'm going to expand this warmth. This warmth is what separates the sky from all this blue. So a little bit of a splash up in the top of these warm reds before a bit of a splash of cobalt blue, and then just washing that all together. What might be nice to do is elevate my page a little bit, about 15 degrees or so, and this will just let these colours flow down, and it will keep the sky more intense at the bottom and less intense at the top. See how, because we splash things on, we've got this nice mix of blue and red, which is forming sort of semi-neutral, semi-purple kind of colour. And with all the water, it's just a very faint suggestion at the top, nothing too rigid. Bit more red, few splashes, bit of red down in here as well. And we'll just let that do its thing. In the foreground, I'm going to avoid using too many colours or too many pigments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this same cobalt blue, this same Hansa yellow, and I'm going to mix my green. And this green can now come in to some of these foreground areas, or these getting towards foreground areas. Just sort of reinforcing. We've got these blue trees, but we're giving them a little more presence with a green. Just a lovely sort of bolder green. And again, we can vary that. We'll add some more blue in places. I've still got my page elevated, so things are still lovely, soft, moving around. I can now come forward, and we can see in front of these greens there's like a slither of light. And I'm going to simulate that light with my yellow again, but also try and leave some nice white space on the page. And then as we come even further forward, we've got some really bold colours, haven't we? This is where we can actually really start to see that it's a green. It's not just a sort of mix of blues and things. So these trees are going to go for a nice and thick green. What we might do here, we'll see. At the moment, this is still blue and yellow mixed. But look, to give it some real punch, what we could do is we could add in a third pigment at this point. So all I'm going to do, get some indigo, really dark, bold colour, and use that inside these closest trees, and that might even just start suggesting some sort of branch-like shapes. Remember, these are abstract, look, they're just circles, they're not really trees, but they are abstract versions of my trees, abstract shapes of tree. So continuing to use this indigo to get this sort of dark area on the page, and then coming forward again we get this reflection, don't we? So we are back to our reds, our sort of mayan orange with our yellow, and we want to just reflect this sky all the way down into our water. And that will complete the abstract feel of these colours. It will complete the colours coming down, joining together. Now what we've got is a little bit of weakness here, haven't we? Where all the waters run, things feel a bit sort of incomplete. So I'm going to stop the water running now by popping the page flat, and before we finish this first layer of colour, I'm just going to come back and reinforce a little bit, just in the middle, just reinforce a little bit with some greens, and then even just to get that feeling of movement running through it, I'm going to allow some reds and oranges to splodge in there, and then we can just do a final touch. Don't do too much, but a few final touches, a little splash here and there. We need to let this dry. We need to see what's happened to our lovely abstracted landscape, and when it's dry we'll be able to respond to the degree of contrast, saturation, how the shapes are feeling, and then work out what do we do next. Do we add more colour, more pen, or even just call it finished? So we are mostly dry, and we can see we've got this lovely graduation of colour, of tone, value coming through, and this is sort of flowing together, but lacking a little bit of the clarity of shape, perhaps the clarity of these layers as we go from faint to boldest. And that's natural. When we paint wet on wet, everything flows together, but we're going to correct it a little bit now with our second layer. So with the second layer of the same ideas, the same colours, I've got my blue and my yellow. We're going to just come forward. So we're going to find this first layer of trees first, going for this sort of bluey green, just varying it between how much blue, how much yellow, and just trying to suggest these shapes, just using these little faint ink outlines to suggest some of that shape, but also where we want to change things, we can change things. And we can, if we want, we can get even more detailed. We could use little flicks of our brush, to create little suggestions of trees poking out. We could keep it even more abstract. We could just do little circles if we wanted. There's no rules here. This is about you simplifying your scene and making it your own, rather than feeling constrained by sort of traditional or realistic expectations. Instead, we're practicing an abstraction, practicing how to create just beautiful scenes from inspiration from scenes in front of us without being stuck sort of rigidly to those scenes. Coming forward, a little bit more colour, and there we go. Now we could leave this as a hard edge, or what we could do is we could come in and just soften. And do you see how this looks separate from the landscape? If we soften it, it suggests it's joined, but we leave some edges because then it shows that there are edges. There is like a start to this layer and an end to it, but just a gentle bit of softening, and this layer will be magically complete. And we can move forward one more. Now what I really like is when we increase the contrast, I felt things got much more, real, much more improved. So in this very abstract set of circles, I'm going to focus more on the indigo this time. So really a colour which is going to just power our contrast, power our value just massively up. Going to use little sort of strokes to join these shapes together. Again, just suggesting a few sort of branch-like things going on, without over-suggesting, without trying to be, too realistic, but whilst keeping the feel of this scene. And a few little horizontal swipes just to get this feel of the water meeting the land. And again, look, we've got this lovely reflection, so let's just make sure that is still there. We could even brighten it with a little bit of yellow in places as well. Having done that, what could be fun, just touch in some of these colours into our deep indigo. Again, just to feel that reflection, to make it a little bit more interesting. Just sort of focusing what I'm enjoying about the scene really, and using that to spark ideas. And just like that, I think this layer is pretty much complete. What we could do with our last touches of watercolour, maybe a few splashes just here and there, just to fill some of this space. Little touch of this cobalt into these distant mountains as well. And what I'm going to do is actually go straight in with our final layer of ink. And I'm using the same blue ink again. And this time what I want to do is be rather gentle. But I want some of these shapes to get a bit more of that texture that we can see. So we can see at the top, we've got these little textures coming down, these kind of cliff textures coming down. And if we're nice and gentle, what we'll be able to do is get the suggestion of these cliffs without ruining the soft feel. And this is where pens are amazing because they're so quick. We could do this all with watercolours, of course we could, but pens have a different feel. They make us sort of more illustrative, they make us more efficient, they provide different effects, and that's what we're going for with these kind of touches. Just plenty of little quick loose touches to get that texture in really easily. In the foreground, or the middle ground I should say, we can use our pen again to just suggest some more branch-like textures, being aware that we are wet on wet now, so we're going to get a slightly different feel. But again, it's just solidifying the thoughts, the ideas that we had at the beginning, and just bringing them out at the end. Even more so in this foreground, we can come in and push quite hard. We'll end up doing some sort of scraping probably of the paper and creating textures like that. We'll end up producing some blues within these deep colours, re-solidifying these semi-abstract or very abstract shapes we've got. And even into the water, we can link things together with a few little lines. Not going to leave it there. My very last touch is to soften out some of these textures. So look, if you have gone too hard, I think I haven't actually gone too hard, but I knew it was a risk. But if you have gone too hard, you can always come back in and just get that softness back. A simple touch with your brush. And just like that, I am now, one more touch, I just felt like a little bit of blue in there. Just like that, I'm now going to call this one done. So pop my initials on and then hide my signature and my name in the piece somewhere. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you did, then check out more of my videos on abstract and loose landscape sketching, and I'll see you in the next one. So thank you everyone for watching my little sketching videos. If you enjoy my content, please do subscribe to my channel because it makes me really, really happy. Thanks again.